Okay. Hello, everyone. I am Amrita. I am the Communications Associate at FSR Global, which is the Secretariat for Indian Association for Energy Economics. Today, we welcome you all on the behalf of I-AEE to our first online debate this year. Thank you for joining us today. I would also like to inform you that this debate session is being recorded for future reference. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Sushanta Chatterjee, who is the president of I-AEE, to deliver his opening remarks and officially begin this session. Over to you, sir.
I think Sushanta sir has just passed it over to me. I'm sorry. Sir is in meeting, but he will surely make the closing remarks. So on behalf of Dr. Sushanta, I'll make the opening remarks for I-AEE. Firstly, a very, very warm welcome to all the speakers, the discussants, our very lovely beloved moderator, and all the participants in our first debate in the new series that we have launched, which is mapping India's energy needs for Viksit Bharat. A lot of interesting debate is already happening on our social media about how can we define Viksit Bharat and how should we sort of chart our energy needs for there. So precisely for that very reason, the first part of this debate series focuses on our energy needs, very well keeping in mind the economic targets that we have for 2035 and 47 and beyond. So we hope that our speakers and discussants are able to enlighten us with some of the key questions we need to ask ourselves before we chart those pathways. But a quick introduction to the Indian Association of Energy Economics for those of us who are new to us. So we are a chapter of the International Association of Energy Economics. Our essential role in the sector is to be able to facilitate knowledge exchange amongst the different stakeholders in the energy sector, both within the country in India and also how India is represented globally, and vice versa for the global audience to understand the Indian energy ecosystem. So what we essentially do as an association is that we gather like-minded people like the ones you see on the screen today here, and we discuss through some of the challenging questions we have to ask ourselves for the Indian energy ecosystem. We do this through a series of activities. Some of them are debates, which are open access, like the one you're in. We do also Chatham House roundtables, which is more invite-only, very focused group discussions. We do a lot of video recordings in terms of master classes from the senior experts from within the sector, which is again available to those of us who are members of the association. We are in the capacity of building our own video podcast series. Again, stay tuned for some exciting insights from all of us. And of course, what we intend to do in due course of time is to also be able to gather all of us physically through a conference where we will try and exchange ideas from different corners of the country on these big questions that we're asking ourselves here today. But of course, I'll drop the link of our association here in our chat so that you can explore more in your free time. But on behalf of the board members of I-AEE, I would like to welcome all of you to this debate. And I would like to now hand over the floor to our moderator, Professor Anup Singh, who will introduce our speakers and discussants and kick off the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Shweta, for the introduction to I-AEE, the Indian Association, and introducing the topic for debate today. Given the fact that the India has been growing at a moderately to rapid growth over the past few decades, we have witnessed that the energy consumption has also been able to push forwards in terms of the energy mix, as well as the overall energy availability to the population of the country. Along the same time, we have also witnessed a transformation in the sectoral contributions to the energy demand, where the energy consumption by the industrial sector started taking up. But soon we witnessed that the services sector, where we have contributed enormously through our IT power, has been instrumental in engaging us the energy demand, specifically for the air conditioning purposes. As the infrastructure growth and the industrial growth picks up, and which is going to drive the growth of the Indian economy in the years to come, in the decades to come, we are going to witness a greater and greater demand for energy. It's in that context we have today's debate. And as the name of the association also suggests, that we are actually looking after energy and economics. So both the issues we have to address. And in doing so, we are trying to relate a very interesting and a debate which revolves around the economic aspirations of the country, of the individuals, of the various classes of the society, and how that can be addressed through provision of energy needs, through the public sector to the private sectors at one hand, through various supply basket scenarios, while of course being able to meet India's climate policy commitments and ensuring that the energy poverty is addressed to the extent as far as possible. We have a very interesting panel with us. We have Dr. Kirit Parekh, and he needs no introduction at all. He has been in numerous committees and the brain power of the energy policy for decades. He has been instrumental in the integrated energy policy when he was member energy at the Planning Commission. He has been the director of Indira Gandhi Institute of Development Research for 10 years, where I was also there and I worked under his supervision. We have with us Ghanshyam Prasad. He also, of course, also doesn't need an introduction. We all know, I know him for the last 2 decades or so when we were in HERC, and now currently he is the chairperson at Central Electricity Authority, the body which is responsible for the overall overarching quote unquote monitoring of the power sector, the taking some policy insights, and of course doing the important task of the planning for the sector, both for the generation, transmission, and the distribution end. He has also contributed to the regulatory and the policy aspects of the Indian power sector during his tenure at the ministry. We have Mr. Shashwatam, who's executive director of NETRA and TPC. As we know, NETRA has been instrumental in taking a lot of technological initiatives to the forefront and ensuring that the NTPC remains one of the leading public sector entities into taking the dive into the new technological initiatives being introduced, whether it is about carbon capture, whether it is about hydrogen, green hydrogen, or energy storage. It's a very, very interesting panel with us. I'll request Dr. Parekh to give his opening remarks for about, say, 8 minutes or so. So, Dr. Parekh, would you like to share a PPT or something?
Yeah, I will use my screen also.
Sure.
Let me begin. Oh, how do I select my...
At the bottom of the screen, you have a green button called Share Screen. And then you can select the PPT, which is already visible, possibly to you.
I can't see this, but...
If you can send it to me, I can share it from my end.
There is a green button.
It's on my desktop.
Yeah, it is on the desktop. There is a green button, share screen at the bottom. From there.
At the bottom of the screen that you see. Yeah.
Yeah, now I can share screen.
Yeah.
Why don't I get to... Okay. Yeah. Okay, I've got it.
Yeah.
Okay. I think this is really the issue is country has to grow at a certain rate to become Viksit Bharat by 2050 or say 2047. That at the same time we need to worry about how do we take care of things that Anup mentioned, namely net zero requirement and the aspirations of different people. I think what one normally does is one uses a kind of energy needs projections are made usually based on a regression technique. They use past data and promote it. But then what happens is in a world in which your whole technological environment is changing, you're facing a new kind of constraints like climate change and so on. Those things do not quite work. I'm just going to use some example. For example, for Viksit Bharat, I think this is the kind of growth rate we need. The first 8% for the next 20 years, then 7% and so on. And then if you have the elasticities of without any need for climate change and other things, you might have one, but you have a case B where elasticities are obtained from you're projecting them to go down because you're pushing energy efficiency all around. Then the requirement of energy will be very different. It will be almost by 2050, it may be nearly 18% less than in a normal case. And by 2070, it may be 50% less. So you can see that this structural change and climate change concerns really matter. On the other hand, one can also use a macroeconomic model where you have all the sectors of the economy, and you also have demand systems for different consumer classes, and your endogenously determined income distribution is there. Then when you make projections, then you can account for various technological choice and their impact on the sectoral structure of the rest of the economy, and then as well as the rebound effect and the consumption demand as income grows up and people will change the consumption pattern from rich to middle to from poor to middle to rich kind of things. And at the same time, you have to see what will be the impact of energy efficiency and spread of electric vehicles, because it is not just electricity, but we need to reduce also the requirement for petroleum products. Now, we have done 3 scenarios. Is a dynamic as usual, energy efficiency called DEE, and a third one where we use energy efficiency plus EV penetration. And the kind of changes in electricity demand, this is just electricity demand, but you can see that, when you have no change of efficiency or electric vehicles, by 2060, you will have something like 19,366 billion kilowatt hour. It reduces to 15,775, and almost a 20% reduction because of energy efficiency. But once you bring in energy efficiency and on top of the electric vehicles, then charging and other things will cost you another. And so it becomes even 10% higher than what is in the Dow business scenario. So I think it is important to take this into account. What are the policies and feedback on the energy demand requirement? Now, if you really look at the same time, the issue of it's not just climate change we are concerned about. We are also concerned about the local air pollution. And new clean coal technologies are available, which can, perhaps one thinks about it. Now, we have done some studies along with IITs and so on, and we have worked out you have a subcritical coal-based power plant with electrostatic precipitator. You have a supercritical plant with, again, with ESP, all with ESP, ultra supercritical with ESP. And ESP is a modern one, can trap almost 2.5 microns, and fluidized gas desulfurization can reduce sulfur, and selective catalytic reduction can also reduce nitrogen and other things. At the same time, we have to think about carbon capture and storage, because that is one option we might have to consider if we are going to do both climate change and local air pollution. Here is a scenario without climate change concerns. And you could say, I mean, the dynamics as usual with particulate matter, because I've used particulates as dynamic as usual, because electrostatic precipitators for particulate matter control has been now mandated, but so not everyone is using it, but they will be in the next few years. So these are the scenarios, and you can see that we will still need a large amount of coal would come in because we have not imposed any carbon constraint here, and so on. So the requirement of coal, almost 99%, is in the generation of power. If we don't worry about climate change, only concerned about local air pollution. But with all this also, you can see that the emissions in 2050 can be significantly reduced with the scenarios we have done. Dow PM as SOx is going to 94 by 2050, NOx to 41, and CO2 9530. But when you use particulate matter control, SOx, FGD and SCR technologies together, and then you will certainly reduce SOx to really very little. NOx, all can be under control, but of course your CO2 will go, and so on. Now, if you at the same time take along with it, if you say I would have power generation scenarios, what would it be? And you could say I have to have climate change constraint. Now, how do you impose climate change constraint? One way to do it is to say that this is the total available space in the global environment, and India's share on the basis of a per capita equal share for all people in the world, with a constant population of, say, 2020 or whenever we arrive at an agreement, then India's share between cumulated emissions from 2020 to 2050 can be 156 CO2 billion, billion tons, or 133 billion tons. So, I mean, if you take that kind of a available space for India, and then you said we are, it's gigatons, sorry, and we do that, then we have two scenarios. One, it assumes that it is a 156 is your share, and another where it is 133 gigatons is your share of CO2 emissions. And you can see that you can, while you significantly reduce coal requirement, you have still significant amount of supercritical power plant, coal-based plant, with CCS there. And if you have less space, you have less of it. That is, if CB 133 will give you less coal, but still with substantial amount of power plant. Now, at the same time, you can say you will have other nuclear and other things going up. We've done also sensitivity analysis, much less nuclear. It doesn't change much. Results, other renewables come stronger in that case. But the thing that I have not shown here is that if you go to CB 133, your significant loss in GDP and per capita consumption takes place. So that net zero is not going to come to you without some cost, some loss here in this. So I think we have the problem of balancing Viksit Bharat things and climate change considerations together. And I hope that we can do that. And it also depends upon the kind of technological change that takes place, how quickly the price of battery technology comes down, how quickly we can build nuclear power plants without cost escalation, which has been our experience for many years. So I think, of course, there are all these uncertainties, but this gives you some idea. And the main message I say is you cannot just use regressions to project this. You have to think scenarios with a more articulated macroeconomic and structural model with demand projected based on econometrically estimated demand systems with taking care of income distribution and so on and so forth. So that's where I stop at the moment.
Thank you, Dr. Parekh, for the very, very interesting and insightful presentation. And I believe, this is the modeling exercise you love to do and you have been doing all through. I have just one quick question for you. You did mention that, the net zero is not going to come at any, it's going to cost us something in terms of loss of growth, right? So what kind of scenario one should visualize where this impact is also minimized? Part of it is one can think of in investment in RE, but nevertheless, it's going to curtail some amount of either our consumption or it would require some changes in the lifestyle as well. So,
well, consumption change is a question of lifestyle also, but also it's a question of technical measures. If I can get my air conditioner to run with 1/3 the amount of energy that it consumes today, then I don't change my lifestyle. But actually, I may worsen it because I may use it more. But nonetheless, the thing is that less energy would be required. And considering the kind of progress we have seen in energy efficiency of appliances and other things over the recent decade or so, I think one can be quite optimistic that you will be able to reduce this. At the same time, if you increase the efficiency of solar PV cells from 20% or 18% or so something today to 30%, that can make an enormous difference into the system. So I think, yes, technology can still help us in many ways of getting around to these problems. But in the end, yes, you cannot just keep on consuming with an unlimited amount of assuming energy is available. As Gandhiji said, the world is enough resources for everyone's need, but not for everybody's greed. So.
Thank you very much. I think with those insightful comments, let me move on to our next panelist. We have Ghanshyam Prasad. So we'd like to have about 8 minutes of introductory comments from you, Ghanshyam.
Thank you, Anup. And let me at the outset thank I-AEE to invite me to be a part of this very important discussion today. I think what we had been debating about the scenario which is going to be in Amrit Kal, that is 2020-2047. We had been discussing from the power sector perspective for quite some time. And I think Viksit Bharat, the topic which has been selected, is very close to the objectives which have been assigned to the power sector as such. And even the National Electricity Policy, which was initiated in 2005, is required to undergo a change. We drafted one, but when we went for its approval, we have been asked to update it at least till Amrit Kal, that means at least up to 2047 vision. We are working on that as well, and in that we are further going to have some consultations on this. But thank you, Parekh sir. I think you have given a very, very good presentation on the projections, what is being very key drivers to the demand, which will really take us to 47 or 50. There could be difference of opinion on the numbers. I'll not go into that. But definitely the demand projection is the key to any futuristic plans that is worked out. What I have seen in my little experience of around 34 years is what project very little goes true. It has a lot of deviations. Even if I can say that there are three aspects of it. One is the plan. The second, how do I really, that means plan is based on some theoretical or modeling exercises. Then I need to implement that plan. Then I had to see what are the possibilities of its implementation. Once it is implemented also, then there are another constraints of the operational aspects. So even though whatever we had planned of IC installed capacity, probably that may or may not be available to me when I really go and meet the consumer's demand. And then there are surprises with respect to the demand variations that everyone keeps expecting. Maybe, I mean, this is what we have seen in the very recent past. Some months are demand variations of more than 20%, and some months variations of either zero or maybe a bit negative as well. So that's the kind of challenge with the power sector is presently undergoing as on date. But nevertheless, I think the point is well taken that if we have to go towards the Viksit Bharat, that means the kind of growth that is taking place, particularly in the Indian scenario, I'll say it is unprecedented. Recent years also had seen that it has been growing at a rate of somewhere around 8%, or many times it even touches the double digit, somewhere around 10 to 11%. In fact, last month itself, the energy growth was around 11% as such. The drivers going forward, which is visible as of now, could be either towards the green hydrogen side, the larger pictures, the larger side I'm trying to say. Could be the data centers, could be the EVs, could be the change lifestyle itself. I mean, a number of factors could be there. And then economic growth itself is going to drive all these aspects. Now, how much, where, again becomes a very big question marks. I mean, these are which again goes to the planning aspects of it. So of late, you must have seen that CA had been driving on the resource adequacy aspect of the thing. That means now everybody must planning on a resource meticulously so that at least we are able to meet the demand and meet the demand in a more reliable manner. Resource adequacy, we have slightly broadened the scope now. It should not be only misunderstood as resources from the supply side of it. That means from the generation side. Resource adequacy, definitely right now, the rule mentions only about the generation side or the supply side of the resource adequacy. But we will be going to ensure the resources which are required for transmission, whether it is ISTS or the intrastate, then going even up to the distribution network and right up to consumers, so that the entire value chain, starting from the generation to the consumers, it is ensured. And it has to be to ensure that it is in a reliable manner. In that process now, I'll just like to brief a bit, is CA has already done the first part of the exercise of resource adequacy plan. This is the supply side of almost all the DISCOMs as of now, and almost it is finalized. Next exercise that we are, again, we have said that it will be dynamic, which is very important, that it has to be revised at least once every year. And that second round has also started, and we are now targeting anything up to 34, so that at least we have next 10 years of visibility. So minimum of 10 years of visibility, that is one part as per the planning, and the people must be tying up those capacity, and that capacity has to be in readiness, and which has to be ensured for a shorter duration by the load dispatch centers, all the load dispatch centers, whether it is state load dispatch centers or the regional ones or the NLDC. So, I mean, this is either during the intraday or the day ahead or week or month or so. So once this is done, then definitely comes the picture of how do we really manage these kind of things. So, I mean, as we go along, definitely we should be targeting more on the renewables, definitely. But this is again with a caution, which I would like to say at this point of time, is even though the efforts have been made to shift the demand from the evening hours to the solar hours, which is very much required in the present Indian conditions, because we would like the way and the manner in which we are adding solar, we need to shift that demand. But at the same time, we should be having enough capacity, enough resources to meet the electricity demand during the non-solar hours and non-windy seasons. So these are going to be two very, very crucial periods during which we need to address. Even during the windy season, it has been observed that there are instances that there is a sudden death of wind generation, and then we have to be prepared to take care of that kind of a situation as well. The big challenge that comes here is again the forecasting, accuracy in the forecasting. I don't know how we really going to take care of this kind of a situation, but definitely some effort has to be made in this direction. Even the weather forecasters, we are totally dependent right now on some external forecasters, and we are happy. I've seen so many RMCs still dependent on the external weather forecasters and say that, okay, I'm taking their help and that help. But the weather forecast, I mean, that kind of a forecast is not at all accurate. So we need to have some kind of our own mechanism of weather forecasting. IMD has to gear up. Things has to gear up so that at least we have a much better coordination in that. Other aspects that comes is, if I leave aside the solar kitty and the wind kitty, is the nuclear part. And nuclear, we had been working presently with NPCL, but definitely there is a drive which we should be trying to see that there is a change in the policy so that more number of players starts coming towards the nuclear side. So that we are able to expedite commissioning of nuclear power plants in the country. Next comes is the PSP, that is hydro pump storage. This again has to be accelerated, even though I have seen that there are other things that is coming in and trying to come in the way of that is being percolated. But the idea is that we should try to have indigenous resources, which is there with us, and it is there in abundance. Particularly the closed loop hydro PSP, roughly more than 1 lakh megawatt has been given TOR, term of reference, by Ministry of Environment and Forests, and we need to quickly expedite and get it commissioned. And this will be much, much better than any other storage resources which are available as of now in the country. Of course, if required, we definitely may go for battery energy storage system. I don't deny that fact, but we must try to expedite commissioning of the hydro PSP. We should try to again expedite even identification of some more PSP sites which are going to be more and more useful to us. Saswandism is there, and I think biomass is another area which we need to take care. And I think recently NTPC has also demonstrated successfully blending of 20% of biomass in the coal-fired stations. I think that's a very good effort that has been made by NTPC, and I think it would go direction as well, so that at least there is a carbon neutrality which is achieved through the co-firing of the biomass. One more area that I just wanted to touch upon, since we are discussing on the futuristic plans, is the gas-based stations. Definitely, we don't have gas as of now, but whatever kitty we have, at least we should try to see that there has to be some mechanism to use these gas-based power plants, at least during the crunch period or during the peaking time. So we'll be trying to see and trying to formulate those kind of construct as well. So idea is whatever is the I mean, whatever we plan, it should be based on the Indian conditions, and we should try to focus on the so that we have the best solutions, not something which is being forced and which is being said by some models, which is driven by some external sources. So I'll stop here, and I'll be more than happy to take any questions on these aspects. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Nishan, for giving a really that broad sectoral perspective, and which the exercise of resource adequacy, for which CA has also issued the guidelines, and now we believe the SERCs have been issuing the draft resource adequacy documents, and we have been looking at some of them. But one thing we did notice across these documents was there was a limited, sort of attention to the demand side, specifically with respect to demand response, right? So, and one part is demand response itself, and second is also that the kind of flexibility, that generally one would expect, in terms of the ability of the state level utilities to take a decision on a short-term basis, and because of the variations, and now of course perhaps the uncertainties introduced by the climate changes that we are witnessing around us. So first question is of course related to the contribution of demand response, and second is what is the readiness of the DISCOMs as far as their ability to do the short-term forecast and address the variabilities that they have been witnessing.
Coming to your first question, in fact, I missed that point of DRE, and particularly the distributed renewable energy sources is going to play a major role, and maybe this coupled the microgrid and mini grid at certain locations probably is going to be the key areas. Going forward, because of the construct of going green, particularly by the industries and the green productions, another segment that is going to be affected is the CNI consumers. And these CNI consumers, definitely they will be tying up with some renewables, some storage, and they will like to go green as quickly as possible. So these are some disruptions that probably will be happening in the entire constructs of the DISCOMs. They may either remain with the DISCOMs and have, both ways, or they might even as well go out of the DISCOMs and try to manage themselves. The things will keep on happening in this direction. We did factor some part of the DRE when we are planning or when we are making the resource adequacy. But then right now, less visibility is there in this particular spectrum, so not much have been captured. Regarding the energy efficiency part, I think you mentioned about that part as well. So energy efficiency definitely will be taken care, and we have considered while making the demand projections. So energy efficiency have been duly factored in, but DRE definitely, and the demand response. Demand response, again, preparedness, if you ask me, it's not there as of now, unless we have a good amount of communication system between the consumers and dispatch centers. Probably the things will be lacking in that area. So maybe after we have smart meters and we have redundancy into the system, we have a good maybe DSOs, we have good communication facilities between the consumers and the grid operators, the distribution grid operators, then probably the things can be slightly better. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. The changes we are witnessing in the energy sector as a whole, not just about the electricity sector, but going beyond the scope of the electricity sector, we witness that the iron and steel sector is witnessing greening of the processes. The cement industry is talking about it, right? These changes are going to be reflected in our supply basket as well. So, Mr. Shashwatam, specifically, I wanted to know your point of view that where is the technology roadmap laid out in front of us as far as we are going to see the changes which are going to impact the demand side as well as the supply side of energy over the next few decades to come. I believe, Mr. Shashwatam, you want to share some slides there. So you have about 8 minutes to go.
So first of all, good afternoon. And let me thank AE for having me here. And I'm speaking after Chairperson CA and Dr. Viksit Bharat. So I will try to focus on the technical part. However, most of the technical part, Chairperson CE has already covered. So what I am bringing, the complete scenario, but then primarily the power sector scenario. Is my slide visible?
Yeah, it's visible, but can you put it in the PPT mode?
Okay.
I think
Has it changed?
not yet. You will have to reshare the screen. I think you might be sharing the slides. You have to reshare the PPT view.
Okay.
Now
It's a challenge. Okay.
show your PPT and click on that
F5, I think it is.
big
Shift
screen.
F5,
See,
F5.
bottom row, big screen.
Mhm.
Yeah, this one.
This is the one.
Yep.
Something has improved.
No, it's you just click on it.
Probably it's already being presented. There is another screen there. So
Okay, fine. So let me not lose time. Let me speak.
you may want to go through the slide itself. I mean, it's visible, but only thing is the view area just reduces a little bit.
Okay, fine.
You can still share it.
Okay, so see, this is the outline of the presentation, and we are
Are
talking
you sharing
about.
some screen right now?
Yes, it is not there.
No, it's not visible. It
Share
is
the
not.
screen, please.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm surprised. So now
There is a green button at the bottom. It's a share screen. Please click on that.
no, I have clicked there, but then it is not taking me anywhere. So that is the issue. Okay. So let me now stop this thing. Let me not waste any time. See what we are seeing at this point of time in power sector, that though we are going big in the renewables, but then coal is going to remain for quite some time. And there are reasons for that, primarily 3 or 4 reasons. That number one, a lot of money is already invested in coal power plants. More than 10 trillion Indian rupees has been invested in this thing, coal-based power plants, and that has to be handled with great care. Otherwise, not only power plant operators will be affected, but then the financial institutions also will be affected. So this is the first thing. Second thing, most of the coal power plants are young in age, so they have still very many years to go. So this is point 1A and 1B. Second point is that our country is having a lot of coal reserve, around 319 billion tons of coal reserve. And on the other side, we don't have any oil reserve or gas reserve. So if we are switching out from the coal-based power plant altogether, then practically we are not using our energy source and we'll be completely dependent on the liquid fuel and the gaseous fuel. The third point is that economy of lot many states like Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, Odisha, their economy is dependent critically on the revenue from the coal. And then this percentage varies from 70% to almost 90%. So if this coal is stopped, so that also may create something problem. So with these three things, the thought is that the coal-based power plants are going to remain for substantial period of time. However, we are going big in renewables. The second thing is that, however, the CO2 emission has to abate. So what as a country and in Niti Aayog, the thought is that CO2 emissions will be reduced. So right now, for each unit of electricity generated, we produce around 850 grams to 900 grams of CO2. So progressively, the idea is to bring it down to around the level of gas-based power plant. Now, Europe has declared gas-based power plant as green plants. And compared to 850 grams, a gas-based power plant, they emit around 500 grams of CO2 for every unit of electricity generated. So we are looking to cut it down progressively from 850 grams to 500 grams. And the strategy is number one, that energy efficiency. So we are looking to improve our heat rate and other things and improve and reduce the CO2 emission by around 100 grams, 100 to 150 grams. We are looking to cut down the emission. Second point is to increase the percentage of biomass co-firing. Chairperson CA mentioned that very recently, in fact, a couple of days back only, we have gone ahead and fired 20%. But then we have our own plans to increase it to almost 50% level, and ideally to 100% level also in couple of our plants. So several things are being done. So this is another pathway. This will also bring down the CO2 emission by around another 100 milligrams. The last part will be taken out by the CCUS. In fact, this presentation, which I could not share, was primarily focused on CCUS, which Dr. Kirish Parikh also mentioned that at some point of time, we may have to look at it. So in power sector, we are looking at it very, very closely. To give the numbers, as a country in industrial sector, we emit total of around 1,800 million tons of CO2 every year. And out of 1,800, around 1,000 million tons comes only from power sector, that is the coal-based power plants. So we need to do something. If CO2 emission has to be curtailed, then power sector has to play a major role. And in the balance, around 600, 700 million tons, almost 50% is the cement and 50% is or 40% is the cement and 40% is the petrochemical sector, and steel sector is balanced 10%, and all others combined, remaining 10%. So we have to play our role. So we are continuously looking what is happening elsewhere in the world. So this entire thing can be divided into three parts. The first part is carbon capture, that is separation of CO2. The second part is how to utilize the CO2 having separated in a meaningful way, in a thing which is economically valuable. The third thing is that if nothing can be done, then we have to sequester it safely. So in India, we are focused in all three verticals. The first vertical, there are further three pathways. One is the physical route of CO2 capture, other one is the chemical route, and third one is the biological route. It depends on three things. First, from where we have to separate the CO2, what is the concentration of CO2 there. Second, the CO2 has to be separated at what purity level. So if something has to be produced, say methanol, ethanol, then the purity has to be 99% plus. If it has to be enhanced oil recovery, then the purity can be substantially less, 90%, 85% also. The third thing is that what are the contaminants in the flue gas? So whether we have very poisonous or corrosive gases there. So these three things will determine which pathway we have to take. In India, we have worked on all the three pathways. In fact, in NTPC also, we have worked on all three pathways. We have developed technologies which are at TRL level, anywhere from TRL level 5 to 7. So in the physical pathway, the pressure swing adsorption is developed, X13 zeolite based. In the chemical pathway, both secondary amine and tertiary amine based solutions has been developed. The third part is, I did not mention, that is biological way. So different biospecies can eat out CO2 and get converted to different useful things. And human grade compounds like vegetarian version of fish oil, Lamaria, that is anti-aging compound. So all these valuable things can be made out of that. So we have progressed substantially as a country, and there are several pilot to demonstration scale plants which are running in power sector, in steel sector, and in chemical sector. So Tuticorin, they have set up a CO2 capture plant, and then they are using to produce soda ash. Tata Steel has set up a small plant, a 5 tons per day plant at Jamshedpur. Jindal Steel has set up a bigger plant. In fact, they have set up 2 plants. NTPC also, we have already set up 1 plant 1.5 years back, which is running fantastically well. And incidentally, all the 4 plants in this country, they are based on the chemical route. So different types of amines are being used. We have done a small pilot with IOCL, that is a biological route also. So this is the status of the carbon capture, the CO2 utilization. So now this is the key for the future. So if we can convert CO2 to different useful things, then the entire thing becomes that much viable. So there are 8 verticals in this CO2 utilization. The first is the CO2 to liquid fuels. And the examples are petrol equivalent, that is ethanol and methanol, diesel equivalent, that is dimethyl ether, LPG equivalent, once again dimethyl ether, and aviation fuel. So as a country, we are looking very carefully on this sector. And in NTPC, we have already taken up 2 projects. One is 10 tons CO2 to methanol plant at Vindhyachal, where that plant is nearing completion. And very recently, that is last month in March, we have taken up CO2 to Gen 4 ethanol. So that is coming up at Lara. We have plans to go for the dimethyl ether, which is LPG and diesel equivalent. We also have plans for the aviation fuel. So aviation fuel will be produced from the CO2. The second vertical is gaseous fuel, that is synthetic methane. We have identified right now, we are not working as a company and as a country also. The third vertical is the connect to the first 2 are the connect with the energy security. So CCUS getting connected with the energy security. The third vertical is CO2 to fertilizer. So urea, whatever is being produced, or most of the urea produced in this country is from natural gas, which is once again imported. So suppose natural gas is not to be used, then the only other way is the thing what we are trying to develop. That is to separate CO2 from the fossil-based power plant and to produce ammonia. Nitrogen comes from the atmosphere, hydrogen from the electrolysis, so green ammonia. So 2 moles of ammonia and 1 mole of CO2 will give us urea. So this will connect CCUS with the food security. We are going big in this direction also. And most probably in the first quarter, which is this quarter, we will roll out a 150 tons green urea project, probably in our Rihan project. The fourth vertical is CO2 to building materials. Now, once again, we are very ambitious in this thing. In the building material, we are trying to produce a coarse aggregate now and subsequently fine aggregate. So there is no actual number how much coarse aggregate we consume as a country, but then there is a measure how much cement we consume, which is in excess of 300 million tons. So if we take a ratio of 1:4, 2:4, so more than 1,200 million tons of coarse aggregate we consume as a country. So this is a huge size. So we have rolled out different R&D projects. All these are R&D projects, not in the demonstration stage. But then this is a area where we are looking at very, very seriously. The other 4 verticals where we are not working, but then tomorrow we may work. The fifth vertical is CO2 to inorganic chemicals like soda ash. Then 6th vertical, CO2 to inorganic chemicals, organic chemicals like paraffins, olefins, formaldehyde, formic acid, acetic acid. We are not working. Next vertical, 7th vertical is CO2 to carbon morphology, that is carbon nanotubes, carbon nanoparticles. We can split CO2 and have carbon black. So very profitable, but then there is limited market for carbon black and these type of things. So we are not working right now. And the 8th vertical, which I mentioned, that is CO2 to human grade compounds. So as a country and as a company, we this is a complete subject for us, and we have several projects at different stages, which is happening. The last part is CO2 storage, sequestration, what Dr. Parikh mentioned, that at some point of time, we have to, so as a R&D, we are looking at CO2 storage. And this entire exercise is divided into two parts. One part is for the oil sector, which ONGC, Oil India Limited, IOCL, they are leading it. The other is where NTPC is leading. It is the storage of CO2 in one basalt, two unusable coal seams. So this is a study stage, but then we intend to take it to real bores and put real CO2. So that's the project which is where a lot of work is happening, but then not in the physical form as of now. So this is the complete future which is looking to sustain coal-based power plants. We have given a name, that is the blue coal power plants. So it will remain coal power plant. However, it will emit CO2, which is only equivalent to gas power plants. So I will stop here. In future, we also find that there is critical dependence on success of CCUS for hydrogen. So hydrogen has to come, and hydrogen has to be affordable. From where hydrogen is going to come? So what is the electrolyzer route? So what is the new thing which has to happen? Other than electrolyzer, what are the routes? That is a gasification of agri-waste and MSW RDF. So this month only we have rolled out a project which is plasma gasification. That is another pathway which will open the production of green hydrogen. So good thing or interesting thing is that most of these things are not available for sale. So it has to be developed. There are technological gaps everywhere. So the country and people who can bridge these knowledge gaps, so they can lead. Of course, they have to pay the price also, but then they can take the leadership position. So I stop here, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Gotcha. Thank you, Mr. Shashwatam, for really elaborately telling us about the technological developments which are taking place at NTPC Netra, and how the three factors which you identified, that energy efficiency, the biomass blending, and CCS, which are going to contribute to the reduction of emission intensity from the electricity being produced from the thermal power plants. So what's your take on the expected timeline of CCS? Of course, CCS is something which is technology which has been, in the discussions for many, many decades now. Initially, people did have ethical reservations about it. Of course, it's like, sweeping the dirt under the carpet. Ultimately, people said we should be reducing the emissions. But well, different technologies have different contributions to make. What's your expectations that we may expect some deployment of that nature in over the next, say, 5 to 10 years or like that?
See, what I explained, that CCU, carbon capture and utilization. Carbon capture has already reached the maturity level 1. So international benchmark for CO2 capture is $50 per ton. And US DOE has kept a target of $20 per ton for 2030. We have put up a small plant, 20 TPD, which is producing 10 TPD, or which will produce 10 TPD of methanol. So this small plant cost itself is $34. And with the present knowledge, without any additional knowledge, if we do only the scale up, this cost can become $24 per ton of CO2. So the short point is that we are already at maturity level 1 as far as CO2 capture is concerned. Of course, things can improve. Incremental improvements can come always, but then this is the thing which we are already there. Number 2 is critical. That is the utilization part. Now there are a lot of knowledge gaps everywhere. In whether you take ethanol, methanol, everywhere there are knowledge gaps. So first thing is to bridge these knowledge gaps, then design the plant, then to actually put up the plant. I will answer the last part. So we are putting the physical plant for the methanol, where CO2 is already commissioned, hydrogen is under commissioning, and in the first half of this year, we will be commissioning the world's first CO2 to methanol plant at Vindhyachal. So this will be this year itself. The second plant is CO2 to ethanol, that is Gen 4 ethanol at Lara. Though this is a 2-year project, construction means actual work has started in March. So by March of 26, so in 2 years' time, that should be commissioned. The third is the CO2 to urea project. So this is a 2.5-year project, which is expected to roll out physical construction in this calendar year and definitely in this financial year. So then 2.5 years from that point of time. So these are the things which are already rolled out. Now, what we are also trying to do parallelly, so these are the demonstration plant. We don't call it pilot plants because it has all automation. Everything is automated. This is a full-blown plant. Only thing that is less in size or modest in size. So parallelly, we are working on scaled up plants, which will be 1 million tons or 1 lakh tons per annum type of thing. Already we are working on that. So only thing we are waiting for this plant to be commissioned so that we can fine tune our cost numbers, our technical numbers, and roll out the big plants. So I see in first 2 to 3 years, all the demonstration plants and pilot plants to come. And let me also say, we have been to different countries, and we are at leadership position. So we can say with all modesty. So in first 2 to 3 years, all the demonstration plants will come, and progressively from 3 years downwards, the scaled up plants will also come. Let me end by saying that this may require policy support, both monetary as well as non-monetary. Government is fully aware of these things as we are doing. So we are also telling that where are the policy supports required. Generally, non-monetary supports we are saying. Initial few years it will require some hand-holding, and then probably it will work on its own. One more point I would like to mention, that the model what is being worked out or we are doing, so we are not putting any stress on the power thing. So the question which was asked, that how carbon capture, how much power, how much penalty it will put on the power cost. So the answer is zero cost. So right from the CO2 capture to everything, that is factored in the cost of the product. So and then based on that, we are looking for policy and monetary and non-monetary support. So this is the thing, and that is the reason this CCS becomes a tough proposition, because end of the day there is no product. So then from where all these things, difficult to build a business model, but then all issues are known. You have to find the answer.
Sure. Thank you very much, Mr. Shaswatan. So we had 3 excellent panelists with us, Dr. Parekh, Kacham Prasad, and Shaswatanji. And to make this, debate much more interesting, we have 3 discussants with us, and many of you already may know him. Mr. Sethi is there, Mr. Suni is there, and Rajesh Mahdetra. So may I request intervention by Mr. Sethi and followed by Mr. Suni and Rajesh about the discussions which have been really sprouted through the presentations or the interaction we have had, and your response to that. So begin with Mr. Sethi.
Thank you, Anup. Thank you. So the session, let me begin by saying that the session today we scheduled was to look at the difficulties of demand estimation for energy, not just power, but demand estimation for energy. That was the focus of the discussion today. And we even circulated 3 key questions which would try to address that. I will try in the next 5 or 6 minutes to bring back this discussion to what the main theme of the presentation, or the theme of the seminar today was. Clearly, there's a lot of difficulty in assessing demand. That's why most of the speakers skirted that issue. And it's not just power demand, we are looking at energy demand. And I'm driven not by the sheer need for better understanding of how much energy do we need for the economic targets that we seem to be talking about. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful to anyone or any presentation or anything like that. So please bear with me. As we all know, energy is the blood that runs through the veins of an economy. Yet, when I look at the numbers that are being floating around, that have been floating around, there's a clear disconnect between India's projected GDP and energy consumption numbers. I find a huge disconnect between the two. The measure of a developed nation, or Viksit Bharat as we call it, is not based solely on the size of the economy in gross or per capita terms. Nutrition, sanitation, health, education, gender equality, skills, all these and many more also determine how developed a country is and the amount of energy that is needed to get to that stage of development. Truth is that India still is an extremely underdeveloped country with the bottom 710 million fellow Indians accounting for only 13% of the gross national income. So 50% of our population lives on 13% of gross national income. Relative to their capacity to pay, India's energy prices have not today, but for years, been the highest in the world. Bloomberg brings out an index, and it is always India is number one. That means we pay the highest price for any form of primary or secondary energy in the world. No wonder India's energy poverty level has remained consistently below a third of the global average for the last 30 years that I have tracked the data. Maybe more, but at least 30 years, I guarantee you that we have stayed at around a third of the global average. I see no real sign of this changing based on the numbers that are being projected, with even the most optimistic projection still keeping India's per capita energy consumption well below the global average. There is no country in the world that has addressed economic poverty and human development without addressing energy poverty. At least I could not find one, despite immense amount of research to find some country which, though energy poor, has a high HDI and economic prosperity. Indian numbers belie this truth, and other serious physical, industrial, technological, human, and financial resource constraints. I find that we talk very little about these things and we concentrate on numbers which really don't add up. So the global primary energy, just to give you, set the scene for this, the global primary energy demand is seen rising by about 1% per annum, at least till 2050, to reach 855 quadrillion BTUs. This is 35% above the 22 level, and every fossil fuel is growing. Even coal, although coal grows the least, 0.13% per annum, but it's still growing. It is not reducing. Most reference scenarios worldwide show that the projected share of non-fossil energy, including nuclear, to be between 30 and 40% by 2050. India, with 20% of the human population by 2050, as per EIA projection, its share of global energy will rise to 13% by 2050 from the 6% level in 2022. In 2022, we were roughly 18% of the world. By 2050, we'll be about 20% of the world. And our share of global energy supply would rise from 6% to 13%. So still well below the global average. India's share of non-fossil energy, EIA estimates, will be 41.4% in 2050 compared to 20% today. Whereas some of the Indian numbers are showing 90% dependence for electricity, at least, coming from non-fossil sources. So, as I said, the Indian numbers need some rationalization, and we need to sit down and understand why these numbers are so different and so wide apart. Importantly, the EIA projects that India's GDP will only reach $11.4 trillion by 2050 in constant 2023 dollars. This compares with our own numbers of $10 trillion by 2035 and $26 or even 35 trillion, as somebody has recently projected, by 2047. That translates to an annual growth of over 7% till 2035 8.3% or 11% beyond 2035 till 2050, depending on the number you pick. 26 trillion by 2047 or 35 trillion by 2047. So instead of deliberating on these differences, we just stumble along from year to year in the most critical sector of the economy that requires a clear 25-30-year perspective covering all bases and all interlinkages. That's the stage we are in today. And that is why we thought it was so critical to address this issue of assessing energy demand. It has become fashionable at all levels in our country to talk of global warming and SDGs, often without reference to the geopolitics of global commons or the duly ratified framework convention. Apart from loose statements on domestic climate commitments, this dilutes the war-footing focus needed to address India's local environmental issues of air, water, and soil quality. And I was so happy to see my boss, Kirit Parekh, raise this extensively. Addressing these issues of air, water, and soil quality also has huge implications on energy sector, which we seem to never really bring out in the open. With about 7% of global greenhouse gas emissions and practically negligible responsibility for or capacity to address global warming, India will suffer the worst consequences of climate change no matter what we do on mitigation or carbon capture. Whatever we do, we will still suffer the worst consequences of climate change. Our two-point agenda, therefore, should be addressing local environmental challenges and raising the adaptive capacity of the bottom 1.2 billion Indians, who account for almost 50% of the climate vulnerable population in the world. And this adaptive capacity will not be raised without huge amounts of additional energy. Does the current discourse address this? You tell me. At the different levels of GDP projections that we have talked about, 10 trillion by 2035, 26 trillion or 35 trillion by 2047, it translates to a per capita income of $6,000 per capita by 2035, $14,000 or $19,000 per capita by 2047. There are many countries around the world who have achieved this level of per capita income. We are not the first ones to get there. And these countries offer immense insights into how the energy demand changes as income levels rise. Once again, I find that our Indian numbers rarely look at comparators, rarely look at what has happened elsewhere, and we just keep churning different numbers all the time. So let's not even go to 27 and let's look at how to deliver a $10 trillion economy whenever it is delivered with our aspiration of being a global supply chain player with Make in India, and hopefully with an HDI of around 0.85. And if you draw these parallels and look at comparators worldwide, I can guarantee you that India will not be able to deliver this without 70 to 75 gigajoules per capita of energy consumption. Today, we are below 26 gigajoules per capita. So that's the level of difference that we are seeing in these numbers.
Yeah.
Again, we should look at how various projections stack up against this metric. And the last point that I will really make is that there are comparators available today also of investment needed for integrated 40% share of renewables into energy mix. We are not the first one to get there. We will not be the first one to get there. There are people who have gotten there, and we have their experiences before us. The investment needs to achieve this will run into hundreds of billions of dollars annually. The secondary energy tariff will go up significantly and not come down as being claimed. Experience so far, even in India, bears me out completely. So let me stop here and bring back this discussion to what the topic for today was, which was really the need in this country to assess energy demand. And I completely agree with Mr. Ghanshyam Prasad when he said that we need to do it ourselves. We can't rely on others to do it for us. We need to find a way of getting to this number on our own and justify that number and stand by that number. I'll stop here and happy to take questions.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Sethi. That leads me to ask a question to Dr. Parikh as well as to Ghanshyam, is that our historical electricity demand did not have, for example, the new load which has emerged, the electric vehicles. We did not have the emergence of green hydrogen, right? It was not there. So these are two key demand drivers for electricity, and which are also going to witness some shift in demand from maybe, say, from LPG or specifically, if I bring the context of electrification of cooking, so this will bring the shift in demand from, say, LPG or piped natural gas to electricity, and that will place additional demand for electricity. And the additional aspect which was pointed out by Dr. Parikh was about the rebound effect. If we have LEDs which are very efficient, if we have ACs which are much more efficient, the behavioral pattern also changes. So comments from both the experts about how do we really build these things into our demand forecast and how is it currently being done. So to both Dr. Parikh and to Ghanshyam. So whomever wants to start first.
Do you want me to start?
Yeah, you can. Sure.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you. So first thing, Anup, while projecting the demand, we have definitely considered all of them, whatever you have said just now, whether it is EV, whether it is green hydrogen or these new areas. Now, the only question comes is how much and when. So that definitely, as I mentioned to you, this is a huge amount of uncertainty in the way that the things happens. Even though there are projections, it may not happen. But what we have seen is the other side of it, that besides these large scale elements, there are other lifestyle changes and big growth that is happening. And there the growth is much higher. And even though we had thought that our demand would be growing at a pace of around 6.5 to 7% when we were doing 20th EPS, maybe slightly taking care of the COVID period where there was a slowdown. But incidentally, the economy has bounced back and we are experiencing a much higher growth as of now. And hopefully this is likely to continue further as well. So that is how we are revising the numbers. And as I mentioned during my talk is that we will be doing these numbers every year now, dynamically. That is, even the demand will have to be projected on a dynamic manner so that we don't default and we optimize on that resources. The other two factors I'd just like to mention here is India at least is sitting at a juncture wherein we have huge amount of opportunity to optimize and do even energy efficiency. Of course, many people do criticize us that our per capita consumption is much below the global average. True that there are certain to concentrate, particularly in the rural areas where there is huge amount of opportunities to go and increase the demand. But at the same time, India has taken huge amount of initiatives to see that there are energy efficiency brought into each and every type of things, whether it is industries or whether it is in terms of any kind of equipments, etc., etc. There are huge amount of, lot of initiative which has been taken by Bureau of Energy Efficiencies, Energy ESLs, etc., etc. And this has contributed and tried to save that kind of thing. And it's a huge number. And if I add that number, probably by per capita, which we have projected as of now is 1331 per unit as of last year, would be much higher. But then we have the philosophy that we must save. We must try to have huge amount of energy efficiency and we must promote that. So I mean, the demand projections, but what Sethi sir has said is there are huge amount of differences. I do agree with you, sir. IEA projections, I really don't know. We are yet to get into that reconciliation mode with IEA, but definitely their projections are way different than what we actually do it in India, and we need to have more faith. And these, I mean, I'm saying maybe it might be sounding slightly blunt, but we need to develop all these models in-house. We must know what we are doing in that models, and so that we must try to see that whatever we project, it is as per the Indian conditions, and we are able to meet that kind of a challenges. And that is what ECA has taken it as a challenge.
One very quick comment. You know, I have in all my years in the energy sector not come across any empirical data to show that energy efficiency actually reduces energy consumption. Energy efficiency for last 110 years of modern energy has always raised energy consumption, because the more energy efficient we get, the more energy we consume. That's what the empirical data shows. So I just wanted to make that point. I'm not questioning that, yes, we should be more energy efficient. I'm not against energy efficiency. But all I'm saying is that human behavior is such that our cars today are far more efficient than what they were 50 years ago. But we are consuming much more oil energy for cars than we ever did. So I can give you many examples and lots of empirical data on this. But let me start now.
Let me just mention that
if you see, the cost will come down and people will have more and more numbers. So two things happens, and that is what I mentioned initially, is we are at a stage where we are growing at a much faster rate. So let's say that if had I not done that efficiency part, then probably the consumption would have been much higher, and we could have had more energy consumption. But since because we have the energy efficiency, the things have reduced. So say, for example, even in the electricity sector, for example, if I use LED, if I use BLDC fans, if I use 5-star ACs, if I use 5-star refrigerators, 5-star washing machines, probably the consumption will be much lesser.
So you get a greater amount of output, greater amount of GDP output for the same input of energy. But the point is that energy demand still grows. That's what I'm saying. So I'm not denying that energy efficiency has benefits. That's not the issue here. The issue is, where is our demand headed? And
so demand is getting added.
Human behavior is such that as we get efficient, we tend to consume more. That's been proven world over.
Not necessarily, sir. The world statistics are slightly at a different platform. The reason being, they have already saturated, and therein the slightly different thing is there. In our case, besides energy efficient, there is one segment which is doing energy efficiency, but there is another segment which is growing, and that growth is much faster, and that is how you see that the consumption is.
We can have a separate discussion on this, but I can show you lots of data.
Let me bring in Dr. Parekh here on this, specifically, his comments on this impact of energy efficiency on the change in demand. I know, you have taught us that, the income changes also make an impact, and of course, relative prices make an impact, and what is the share of budget one is spending on energy. So all of these things also have an impact, whether the final energy consumption will increase over time, like Mr. Sethi was mentioning. So Dr. Parekh, your comments, please.
Yeah, I have a number of comments. One of this is in the IEA projections in the past. I don't know what the recent one. Usually it took India's GDP growth at around 5%. And even when we were growing at 7-8%, that's the thing. So their projections are not really very reliable from that point of view. The second thing is that Surya Sethi said very rightly so, that human development is far more important than just growing numbers and GDP and so on. In our modeling exercise, we considered highest priority given to human development investments, so that you say by 2030, I want to get an HDI, the Human Development Index, as high as somewhat the lower upper income countries. So I think, and for that we need to invest in education, in a number of things, and we provide all that investment upfront, because before we decide how much is available for other sectors of the economy or for the other thing. So whatever scenarios we have made, the country produces enough capital to fulfill that scenario. And it's very clear that if we really do not have energy efficiency, our demand would grow even much faster. Now the question comes: does energy efficiency reduce your energy consumption in all, or does it increase? Now the two things. For individuals, energy efficiency increases may lead to rebound effect and increase energy consumption. For producing companies or for intermediate consumption, that may not, rebound effect may not be that important or that dominant. What will happen, I think, is that in many of our scenarios we have done is that we have said energy efficiency projected on the basis of past trends as to, let's say, how much energy required per ton of steel, or how much energy is required per ton of this, that, and other things. And based on that, we had projected the energy efficiency numbers. And so I think it is not clear to me that without energy efficiency in a significant way, we can reach anywhere. As far as India's GDP is concerned, I think we can grow easily at 7% on an average for the next few years. And that if that goes, then our per capita income can be as high as, and mark my word, $30,000 in a purchasing power parity terms. Only in purchasing power parity terms, not in actual dollars. And in the past, what has happened is that countries which have grown rapidly, Singapore and Germany, I'm giving you examples, and had lot of exports as drivers of their growth, have seen that their exchange rate has strengthened dramatically. Unfortunately, our exchange rate rupee is falling and not gaining ground. But nonetheless, I think if you consider that purchasing power parity ratio would remain more or less at 4:1, then $30,000 means only $10,000 in nominal terms, consistent with what Surya was saying in some sense. By 2050, I mean. So when we have a demand system where you say that each consumer class has so much amount of money available, and that it is allocated to all the different sectors, including what is spent on petrol and diesel and electricity and so on. And this structure of the demand changes from class income level to income level. And that is accounted for in our models. Now you can say, yes, things may be different. You may have more newer avenues of consumption. New products come up and they require even more energy than before. These things are possible, but then uncertainties are always there in any kind of future projection. So that's where I stop.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Parekh. Can we ask our other two discussants, Mr. Suni and Rajesh?
Yeah, thank you so much. I understand we are running against time, but I'll just pick up the thread where Mr. Sethi and Mr. Parekh and Ghanshyamji mentioned. See, the question is of demand. That's the axiom on which all the theorems of supply side stand. You just move that, all the supply side falls, and we have lots of discussion on supply side. I fully agree with Ghanshyamji that we need Pakka model, our own models, our own data, and have rigor in that. And that is missing. There is no doubt about it. That's one thing very clear. I also agree with Parikh Sahib that regression is not enough. And I tell you, I have written a paper, and today when I listened to the whole thing, 1980, if we used to give our demand in 5 buckets: industrial, agriculture, residential and commercial, and traction. So we used to do regression. And 1980s, industry was 70%, and agriculture and residential was 10, 15 or something like this. And by 1990, all of them reached 33%. And it was following. Then suddenly it changed. And then agriculture stopped growing, traction stopped growing, and industrial started increasing. So I was asking everybody that how this trend is not going, because we had already irrigated the entire Punjab. No more agriculture load was coming up. Understandable. Traction load, which was 3%, came down to 1%. It was not increasing anymore because we have electrified the entire traction. So the point I'm making is that the 14th EPS, you can check 14th, 15th, 16th EPS of CEA, what was projected and what actually happened. There is such a large difference. We need to explain that why did we go wrong so much? And then suddenly the demand was reduced. Now I'm afraid that at present we are not increasing, that suddenly something will change. So the point I'm driving is that we need granular, sector-wise, data-intensive, complete transparency as far as the demand projection is concerned. We are somehow not addressing this in this country. Now, do we need to increase this 5 buckets into more? I heard Dr. Parikh saying that 15% increase because of the EV penetration. I'm not able to comprehend, sir. I need more data that how many vehicles will come, what will be required, so that 15% increase because of the EV penetration. So the issue is railway 100% electrification, still it is only 1%. Maybe, sir, these are all, similarly, electrolyzer, which was mentioned.
Based on that kind of numbers, but I didn't present them here.
Okay, sir. So the point is that electrolyzer, how much load do we get? Do we start giving the breakup of how much is electrolyzer? Similarly for the data center, similarly for the induction cooking, we need very, very granular data. Then only we will know how much load is tameable, how much load is flexible, and then 2 more loads which are coming up, that is pump storage and battery energy. They will become load at certain point of time. So that also has to be introduced. So I'll stop here. I would only suggest that, sir, we need on the demand side projection, much more rigor, our own models, and transparency as far as the data is concerned. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Suni. Rajesh, let's have some perspective from the gas sector as well.
Yeah, I think Anup, already time is over. So I had a very small question like related to gas sector. And of course, my colleagues from gas also would be interested to know. One is, sir, I was there in Shell LNG Outlook event yesterday. They also had projected gas required demand for India. And they had indicated total demand of something like, today we have 60 BCM. And they had indicated about 130 BCM by 2040. So, sir, just wanted to have your perspective that what your model suggests, because the numbers were looking a bit lower on the gas side. And since everyone says that, and at the global level, people are projecting that overall LNG demand will increase by 40% by 2040 as compared to today. Because finally you will replace coal with gas, and there will be, of course, other areas where we can move to LNG also. So what is your perspective, Parikh sir? Would be keen to know that what your model says, and how do you see gas demand going up in India particularly?
I don't remember what the model says, but I can tell you a few things. I can say that, the 15% gas in our energy basket is not going to be realized. And it doesn't even make sense to try to realize that, given that we have such a limited amount of domestic resource. We are importing nearly 48 to 50% of the gas from abroad. and the international prices of gas is high. So I do not think that it makes any sense to push for 15% of gas in that sense. Now, as far as I think substituting gas for some of the hard to abate sectors, I think it's possible, but this would certainly make a niche contribution to the gas consumption and so on. Similarly, I should say the green hydrogen is something I'm not terribly enthusiastic about. 50 units of electricity is required to produce 1 kilogram of hydrogen. So I think you just have to realize that the price today at our cost of electricity, even the lowest cost of renewable electricity can be, $4 to $5 a kg. And that just doesn't make any sense for using it, excepting in some ways where no other option is feasible. And I believe that as far as, one can always say that look at how solar PV prices have come down dramatically, and 90% fall in 15 years. That can also happen in hydrogen, but that if it happens, then we leave it. But till now, I don't see any dramatic changes coming in, and therefore I don't believe that that's going to play a major role. So I think the major role for us is really solar and wind, and you can say even geothermal possibilities might be there. We might even get, and storage would be then critical, whether it's a battery storage or pumped hydro, off-river pumped hydro. We have significant potential for that also. But we can exploit all these because off-river pumped hydro will cost you half as much as normal hydro and can be brought into operation in half as much time. As well as I think that the cost of displacement and rehabilitation would be minuscule compared to what happens in large hydro projects. So I think there are options available like that, and we can certainly hope to get somewhere there. And I think I agree with what Mr. Shashwatan said, that coal is going to be here for quite some time, and that we have to recognize that. I mean, we have to recognize the sociological implication of cutting down coal. Jharkhand, Odisha, and Madhya Pradesh, and they have something like 20% of the workforce employed in the coal sector. And it's not just the workforce directly employed. In a coal economy, there are many others indirectly employed, all the women. Our law provided from 36 or 38 onwards that women cannot be employed in coal mining. And therefore, women are working in other areas, but all surrounding the coal economy. So I think there is a huge amount of social cost involved in cutting down coal significantly and quickly. But I think one makes these scenarios with all these assumptions that we are able to overcome this and so on and so forth. But once you try to bring out some policies, you don't forget these things. And that's the critical thing.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Just one point I'll add here, sir, because we were talking about efficiency. Yesterday, there was a specific mention about Europe, that in Europe, gas consumption saturated in last 1 or 2 years. And then because they had done a lot of energy saving, now their demand is really come down by 20%. And then that they are expecting to be there at that level for next 10-15 years. So efficiency has really shown that it reduces demand. Only thing is, like as Ghanshyamji said, that when you have increasing demand otherwise, then efficiency doesn't come into you don't really feel the efficiency.
Actually, most European countries and industrialized countries, US, Canada, and all European countries, show very little increase in their energy consumption the last 20 years. and yet some of them have received significant fall in that. But I think they have reached a level of development which is they not have to build any new power plants. They don't have to build any new roads and so on and so forth. And people have another constraint, not income, but time. Given the fact that they have a limited amount of time, they cannot consume so much of energy. And so that is obviously it's stabilized in a very, very real sense.
Population is going down. That is the major, most important contributor is population growth, degrowth.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, and that's how coming down in many countries.
Yeah.
The Indian population is not growing as rapidly as one was projecting, and the fertility rates have come down dramatically. And I think we will perhaps stabilize our population. Some people say by 2060, I am optimistic by 2050 we might stabilize.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Parik. It's always a pleasure listening to you, to your insights, and of course, insights from all the panelists and the discussants. Since we really are completely out of time, we won't be able to take the question and answers. Some of them have been answered by Dr. Parik and possibly other speakers also. We'll perhaps try and take it up at some other event. I'd like to pass on to Sushanto.
Thank you, Professor Anup Singh, and it's been a pleasure listening to the luminaries like Dr. Kirit Parekh, Mr. Kansham, also Sashwatam. And of course, we have in our I-AEE people like Mr. Sethi, Mr. Suni, and several others. So it's been quite some time that we have gathered together to form this association of like-minded people in the energy sector, and it's really a pleasure to be listening to the energy economists and the experts in this segment. And of late, I mean, our main focus is to identify topics of this nature, which cuts across the entire subsectors of the energy sector and bring to the people perspectives from the experts, and then possibly pull together there is wisdom in the form of some policy documents for people to see. We have a lot of activities which we want to engage in. I am sorry that I couldn't make it in the beginning. Basically, the topic chosen was quite important. We wanted to focus on energy needs, I mean, and how to meet those energy needs. I mean, how to assess and how to meet those energy needs given the stated targets, economic targets by 2035-47. And when we use the word energy needs, we did not mean only electricity demand and electricity need. We wanted to enlarge the canvas. Quite often the discussion has been in and around the electricity growth and electricity demand projection. So references were made by Mr. Sethi and also by Dr. Kirit Parekh on the overall energy needs, how it's going to grow. We are still groping into the dark in terms of the exact numbers as to what the energy needs would be in terms of gigajoules per capita energy needs in terms of gigajoules by 2035 and 47. And it has to be an ongoing exercise. But more importantly, one thing possibly we would like to focus more on in our future endeavors is on energy poverty, which is also what we in fact highlighted in our base paper in our background note. I mean, first is assessment of the energy needs as we go along. And then once we have assessed what is our strategy and plan to, help recover this energy poverty. What do we mean by energy poverty, and how we are addressing this aspect in terms of, people talk about, energy ladder. I mean, you move from use of the basic fuel source to modern sources of fuel. So what is our plan in terms of what kind of picture do we have about our energy poverty in the sense? And then given the energy needs that you are projecting for 2035 and 47, what as a policymaker, as a government, as a regulator, what is that we have in mind in terms of eradicating this energy poverty? We would like to possibly, as a sequel to this discussion, which focused on electricity demand and growth, and of course, to a great extent on energy needs as well, assessment, we would possibly like to focus in our next session on the energy poverty per se, and the thinking in terms of the strategies to eradicate that energy. But thanks a lot to all the panelists for sparing time. I know we have overshot, but it's heartening to see that despite our session having prolonged, we still have a lot of participants still hooked on. So that itself shows the kind of interest that this particular topic has generated. And of course, many of them, most of them would have also been encouraged to be here to listen to the experts whom they have been hearing in different fora. I look forward to your patronage, to your support to this budding association called Indian Association of Energy Economics. We're trying to build on, and would look forward to your blessings in future discussions as well. Thanks a lot for sparing time for us. Thank you.
Tushar, there has been a chat from Dr. Suresh Chandra Sharma. If you just try to see that chat.
And those who made Indian. Okay, we will. Next time we could do that. We take this input. There is no point attending the program if you don't give chance to the people to participate. Those who made Indian Energy Scenario 2047 at Planning Commission, Niti Aayog, and perhaps next time you could do that. I think I take this comment with right earnestness and seriousness, and we would look forward. In fact, I had some points from the Indian Energy Scenario 2047 to speak in my opening remarks, and so I could have possibly, had I spoken, acknowledged, but then I take Dr. Suresh Chandra's comments with right earnestness, and we would look forward to having you in our future discussions. So it's been
we had invited, sir, just so that from Niti Aayog, but they were not available. So, but yes, I completely agree. We should give them more space whenever we do this next.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks a lot, all of you, for sparing time.
I think debate like this is something which needs probably at least maybe 3 hours or something, and we can have a lot of cross-questioning, which was just beginning to happening, there was a tempo around it, and then we were reminded that we have already exceeded time. So definitely we should take budget more time next time. So Dr. Barik will have another scenario with a higher.
Bye everyone. Thank you. I must leave now.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.